Hello and welcome to Days of Roar, a Detroit Tigers podcast brought to you by the Detroit Free Press. I'm your host, Tigers beat writer Evan Petzold, and this week I'm joined by Chris Brown from Tigers Minor League Report, co-hosting for the 7th week in a row. Chris, thank you so much for joining me this week. This time, we get to discuss postseason baseball.
Yeah, it didn't feel like it was going to get there for a while. I'm starting to think maybe I'm bad luck for this, but yeah, they made it. So we can finally talk about it instead of thinking about it.
The Tigers had an 87-75 record in the 2025 season, finishing second in the American League Central and securing the third and final AL wildcard spot in the postseason, setting up a best-of-3 wildcard series against the Cleveland Guardians at Progressive Field. It was a 2-4 record for the Tigers in the final week of the regular season, 1-2 versus the Guardians at Progressive Field, and 1-2 versus the Boston Red Sox at Fenway Park. How much do you worry about the end of season struggles creeping into the postseason? Because when you really break it down, if this Tigers team lost 13 of their last 16 games, scoring 2.5 runs per game and allowing 5 runs per game. The offense hit .210 with a .608 OPS. The pitching registered a 4.73 ERA. On top of that, the Tigers lost 22 of their final 31 games, along with losing 41 of their final 69 games. I still think the pitching is more of a problem than the hitting, but nothing about this team is going good right now. So does it magically change? Maybe. But why should I believe that the switch is going to flip in game 1 of the wildcard series after what I've been watching for the last 2 weeks, the last month, the last 3 months? Like, this has been going on for a while now. Are you concerned that this carries over into the postseason?
Yeah, I think you have to be very concerned. Part of the struggles on offense that we've seen are because they faced the team they're about to face again 6 times down the stretch, and that team shut them down time and time again. And it's just kind of wild. On the show, a couple of weeks ago, I posed a question: can this team get to 96 wins? At that time, they were kind of in the driver's seat for a top 2 seed and a bye. They were 78-54 with 30 games to go. We talked about, can they go 18-12? It's like, yeah, it's possible. They went 9-21 and fell all the way to the 6th spot. So it's really hard to have a whole lot of faith in a team that's been a month playing 300 baseball. And when you go deeper into the stats, like you mentioned, you go all the way in the second half, there's not a whole lot of offensive performance and there's not a whole lot of strong pitching. So, what you hope for, and I've spent the last few weeks talking about, anything can happen in the playoffs, and all you really need to do is have 1 or 2 good games as a hitter and you win the series. So you got a chance in any 3-game series. And when you have one of the best pitchers in baseball, you feel good about that. But everything else is pointing to kind of an early exit, unfortunately.
Yeah, the way the end of the season went, not a lot of wins. And then in the losses, it was heartbreaking losses and blowout losses. And so there was a little bit of embarrassment. There was a little bit of heartbreak and not a lot of wins to go with that. But the Tigers somehow found a way. They clinched a postseason berth on Saturday with a 2-1 win over the Red Sox. That also allowed the Tigers to save Tarik Skubal for game 1 of the wildcard series. Initially, Tarik Skubal was scheduled to start Sunday in the series finale and season finale against the Red Sox, but because the Tigers clinched on Saturday, Sunday was not must win to get into the playoffs, so the Tigers did not have to use Tarik Skubal on Sunday. That allows them to pitch him in game 1 of the wildcard series, which is obviously a huge advantage. The vibes have not been good on the field, but at least the vibes were good during the celebration after the Tigers clinched. I think a lot of people were wondering, how are the Tigers going to celebrate? And let me tell you, the Tigers might have been more rowdy in 2025 than they were in 2024. Maybe there's something to be said about, trashing a different clubhouse as opposed to trashing your own clubhouse. But those guys, they had a ton of fun in that small, cramped Fenway Park Visitors Clubhouse after the 2-1 win on Saturday to clinch a postseason berth. Thankfully, they took the victory cigars outside instead of smoking them in the visitors clubhouse at Fenway Park. I smelled a little bit of cigar in there, and then suddenly, all the cigars were outside. So I don't know if somebody got a stern talking to you about that or not, but the boys had a ton of fun. They were drinking beer. They had the goggles on. They were shotgunning beers. They were popping champagne. They were blasting music, singing together. It was a lot of fun. And I just wonder, maybe that's something that carries over into this wildcard series. Maybe that's the spark that can get them going on the field. Because like I said, the vibes in that clubhouse were awesome. The vibes on the field, not so much.
Yeah, and down the stretch, you guys would ask them questions about like, you feeling the pressure or whatever. And they, they're all PR trained at this point, I think. So they know, no, there's no pressure. Hogwash. Of course they were feeling that pressure. And that's,
just watch the game. Watch the game. Like you watch the game and you can tell they were pressing. They were worried. They were afraid of losing their postseason spot. They were afraid of a complete collapse because it was happening right before their eyes.
Yeah. And it's just a completely different vibe from last year, which was just like this weird magic carpet ride. And this year it was like just this stunning collapse where the walls must have been closing in on them. And so just to feel that, to know that you made it despite every chance, working against you or giving yourself every chance to lose it. I'm sure that was a huge weight lifted off their shoulders. And I don't blame them at all for having fun and partying like that. It's the baseball season is so long. It's 162 games, but you're talking 6-8 weeks before that for spring training and all that stuff. So yeah, let off a little steam and I don't mind that at all. And it's always nice to see the celebration, right? I know fans are like, oh, what are you celebrating for? Some fans, not all fans, but yeah, let the guys be guys. Let them have fun. This is the reward for making the playoffs.
They earned it. AJ Hinch talks about playing your 162. And no matter how you get there, whether it's a slow start and a strong finish, or whether it is a strong start and a slow finish, like the Tigers got where they wanted to go, which was the postseason. And so they deserve to celebrate that. And they deserve to celebrate however they want. And those guys had a lot of fun. Hopefully that carries over into the postseason. Now that like the weight is off their shoulders, they're in the dance, and now anybody can go all the way. It just comes down to, can you get hot? And that's really what it comes down to. The Tigers have a team where if they get hot at the right time, we have seen them beat anybody. But the Tigers finally in. They are one of 6 teams from the American League in the MLB postseason. The matchups for the postseason in the American League: number 6, Detroit Tigers at number 3, Cleveland Guardians in the wildcard series. Number 2, Seattle Mariners host the winner of that series in the ALDS. And then you have number 5, Boston Red Sox. Number 4, New York Yankees. That series is being played in New York under wildcard series. Number 1, Toronto Blue Jays. They host the winner of that Red Sox Yankees wildcard in the ALDS. Obviously, once upon a time, the Tigers were the best team in the American League. They were even the best team in all of baseball at one point. And they were positioned for a bye, but they blew that opportunity. And then they blew the AL Central with the Guardians coming back from down 15 and a half games. That might have been the greatest in-season comeback in baseball history. Like, it's the largest deficit a team has overcome to finish first in its division or league, with the 1914 Braves previously holding the record after coming back from 15 games. But the Guardians just came back from 15 and a half games back. So like, lots of respect for what the Guardians have done, making history. But it's a shame the Tigers didn't win the division. And it's even worse that they weren't one of the top 2 AL division winners rewarded with a bye, especially considering where the Tigers were at leading up to the All-Star break. They should have been where the Toronto Blue Jays are at. They should have been where the Seattle Mariners are at. But instead they're not. And we've talked about this before too. You don't get that bye. You don't get to go to the best of 5 ALDS, and you're forced into a best of 3 wildcard series. That's a toss-up. Like, that is a complete toss-up series. Like, it's just so much harder to win a wildcard series and strategize for it as opposed to an ALDS series. It really concerns me, especially with how hot the Guardians are right now. You just wonder, do the Guardians have a little bit more magic left in their tank to ride this thing out and get past the Tigers in the wild card? It's definitely fascinating, and it's a shame the Tigers did not get one of those buys.
And it's interesting thinking back to when we thought the Tigers killed Cleveland's season. They swept Cleveland in Cleveland. And that final game, if you remember, was just a bizarre one where Trey Sweeney hit a home run off Cade Smith. And I think they ended up winning 7-2. And that made it 15 and a half games. And, it felt like, okay, that's it for Cleveland. And I'm looking, they just ripped off right after that. They went like 14-2 after that. You can't kill them. You have to put a stake through their heart and a silver bullet in their head and everything, because they're going to keep coming back. And they did. And yeah, like you said, you have to give them a ton of credit. It takes 2 teams to complete a collapse or a surge like this.
And we saw that last year.
Yeah, they did it. They did their part, and the Tigers did their part. And yeah, what you can, all you can hope for is that, hey, as a Tigers fan, like it no longer matters. Like, it's going to be something Tigers fans are going to remember forever, particularly depending on how the postseason goes. And I'm sure Guardians fans will remember it forever too. But it's a new season now. It really is. It's a 3-game season right now. Win 2 and you're moving on.
Everybody is 0-0 now that the postseason is underway. Let's get into the big two. Question 1 of the big two. What are we watching for in the AL wildcard series between the Tigers and Guardians, and who will win? Just to set the stage here, 9 games in 17 days between these AL Central rivals. The Guardians went 5-1 in the most recent 6 games during this stretch. So the Guardians red hot, not only against all of baseball, but against the Tigers as well. Game 1, it's going to be Tarik Skubal versus Gavin Williams. Tarik Skubal is facing the Guardians for his 3rd start in a row. Gavin Williams is facing the Tigers for his 3rd start in a row. There are no secrets between these two teams. What are we watching for, and who's going to win?
Well, I mean, there are a couple things I'm going to look at. The first thing is walks, which doesn't sound super sexy, but you've got Tarik Skubal, who had the lowest walk rate in baseball, 1.52 per 9 innings, going up against Gavin Williams, who had the highest walk rate in baseball. These are among qualified starters, I should say. Gavin Williams walked 4.46 batters per 9 innings. So what you want to see is if the Tigers can work some counts and get on base, and if Skubal can avoid the kind of the 1 to 2 annoying walks that he seems to occasionally give up to. It's usually guys at the bottom of the order. And you just do not want to have guys on base for Jose Ramirez and Cal Manzardo and Steven Kwan, really. And then for the Tigers, it's about cashing in when they finally do get men on base. They drew 7 walks in 17 innings against Williams this year, but they managed just 8 hits and struck out 29 times in 17 innings. So they scored just 2 runs against him. And with runners in scoring position, they went 1 for 13 with an RBI double and 8 strikeouts. So they have to do better than that if and when they get runners on base. I mean, it's pretty simple there. Get a hit with runners on base, and you've got a chance. And then for Skubal, just a little, like I said, a little more focus. He just needs to continue being who he is, try to shake off that nightmare inning. And really, he's dominated Cleveland this year. They got 16 hits and 5 walks against him in 28 innings with 40 strikeouts. So, Jose Ramirez hits him because Jose Ramirez hits everybody, but he can handle everyone else. Just, no excuse for giving up hits to Austin Hedges and Brian Rocchio. So just go out there and focus, and I think, you'll be good there.
For me, it all starts with winning game 1, and that starts with Tarik Skubal. But for everybody that likes to say, oh, Tarik Skubal, it's a Skubal start, it's an automatic win. That's not true. The Tigers have lost the past 3 Skubal starts, 8-2 to the Miami Marlins, 3-1 to the Guardians, and 5-2 to the Guardians. That was September 12th, 18th, and 23rd. So Tarik Skubal is not an automatic win, but yes, he is the closest thing any team in the playoffs can get to an auto victory. I also think the Tigers need to cut down on the strikeouts. That's a real big problem. Since September 11th, the Tigers ranked 27th in MLB with a 28% strikeout rate. That is 4th worst in MLB when it comes to strikeouts in their past 16 games. Spencer Torkelson striking out 40% of the time. Wenceel Perez, 35% of the time. Riley Green, 32% of the time. Kerry Carpenter, 27% of the time. It starts with those guys. And what sucks is 3 of those players drive the offense. Spencer Torkelson, Riley Green, Kerry Carpenter. In the past 6 games against the Guardians, which the Tigers have lost 5 of them, here are the strikeout totals for the Tigers. 9, 13, 10, 19, 9, 10. So that's 70 strikeouts in 6 games. So 12 strikeouts per game with 15 other outs per game. Like nearly half of the outs have been strikeouts in the past 6 games against the Guardians. You just can't win games that way. And to your point, Gavin Williams in his last 2 starts against the Tigers, 9 strikeouts and 12 strikeouts. Like that's who the Tigers have to beat in game 1 to set the tone for the series. And it comes down to the quality of the at-bats for the Tigers, because as nasty as Gavin Williams is and can be, you mentioned it, he led MLB with 83 walks in the regular season among qualified pitchers. That is how you beat him. But you can't draw walks if you're constantly chasing pitches and not giving yourself a chance to get the free pass. So I think the strikeout problem needs to be fixed right now. I'm also interested to see if this magic from the Guardians runs out. If you look at what they've done, it's been incredible. You have to tip the cap and you have to give them all the credit, because just like the Tigers, they played their 162 as well. But the Guardians won 24 of their final 32 games, leading MLB with a 2.72 ERA. Before that stretch, the Guardians ranked 15th in MLB with a 3.97 ERA in their first 130 games. So their pitching staff goes from 15th in baseball to, in these last 32 games, first in baseball. Like the pitching staff, especially the starting rotation, I think it's bound to regress at a certain point. And with one of the weakest offenses in baseball, that could really derail The Guardians, the question is, when does the magic run out? Does it run out in the wildcard series? Does it run out in the ALDS? Can they somehow find their way to the ALCS again? Like, we'll see when it runs out, but I think at a certain point, the Guardians will regress back to the mean, because for that offense, it is Jose Ramirez, Steven Kwan, and nobody else. Like maybe Kyle Manzardo, but he's been struggling pretty bad for a while now. And I know the Tigers make the bottom of that Guardians lineup look like all-stars, but like those are guys like Brian Rocchio and Austin Hedges and CJ Kafis and Gabriel Arias. I mean, Bo Naylor is spending a lot of time as the number 5 hitter in the Guardians lineup. He had a 195 batting average this season, and he spent a ton of time down the stretch in the number 5 spot in the Guardians lineup. Like he's their number 5 hitter. So the Tigers, they need to be better against the bottom of the Guardians lineup. And if you can contain Jose Ramirez and Steven Kwan, then you've shut down the offense that they've had. They don't have much offense. So if you can shut down those two guys, Jose Ramirez, Steven Kwan, and you can limit mistakes against the bottom of their lineup, that puts the Tigers in a really good position to win some games as long as they can score some runs themselves. And that gets back to the initial strikeout problem. Like, and also your point of cashing in with runners on base. Like they need to get the big hit in the big situation. And I think that comes with having a calm heartbeat, staying steady, sticking to your plan and your approach, not trying to do too much. Like those are all things that the Tigers need to be doing in this wildcard series if they want a chance to win against the Guardians pitching.
And not all strikeouts are created equal, right? Like, people don't like to see strikeouts, but if it's, the first out of the inning and nobody's on base, and it's no different than a ground out, really. But just think back to that Skubal meltdown start. Unfortunately, we're going to have to call it that forever, I think. Tigers were up 1-0. They had the bases loaded with 1 out against Williams. Like this was, key moment in the game, and Zach McKinstry struck out swinging and Witzel Perez struck out swinging. You put the ball in play there, who knows, maybe it's a double play, but a hit scores you 2 runs, an extra base hit might score 3, a soft ground out scores a run. They can't strike out in those situations. And they've been doing that over and over and over again lately. And so that's what they really need to cut down. And Gavin Williams is a tough pitcher. I understand it's hard. Baseball's hard, but they got to figure out a way to put the ball in play more.
I want to ask too, where are you at with Riley Green? This is kind of like a subplot of this question. One of the big two is like, where are you at with Riley Green after this season, right? Because this is a guy who, when you talk about the strikeout issues, I mean, how many times, and again, maybe it's an overreaction, but 201 strikeouts in 157 games this season. Like Riley Green led the American League in strikeouts. Like Riley Green was a strikeout machine. And when you look at his production and what he's done from last year to this year, yes, he was an all-star in 2024. Yes, he was an all-star in 2025. But the WAR has tanked. The OPS has gone down. The WRC plus has gone down. The strikeouts obviously have gone up. The walks have gone down. Now he's hitting for more power, going from 24 home runs to 36 home runs. Granted, he's played more games in 2025 than he did in 2024, but the power production has gone up. But it seems like everything else has started to go down. He doesn't have any speed. His defense is getting worse, at least metrically. And even from the eye test too, the Riley Green defense is not the same. He has no speed. I don't know. Just where are you at with Riley Green after this season? Because I felt like I was giving him the benefit of the doubt for a long time, because I think he deserves it, because he is a very special talent. A guy who 36 home runs, 111 RBIs. Like he is a run producer. Like he is a guy who drives your offense. Then you look at it and it's like, man, he just barely made it over an 800 OPS on the season. More than 200 strikeouts. Like that's not the Riley Green that I think we were expecting, especially when we were at the halfway point of the season. And even going back to last year when he had the success that he had, we thought he was going to take another big step forward, and that WAR has gone down. I worry that Riley Green one day, and maybe this is getting way too far ahead of myself, is going to be a DH only type of player. And that is in Riley Green's future. And that scares me, because I think that tanks his value. And how hard is it to hit 35 plus home runs every year, right? Like, can we really count on Riley Green to hit 35 plus home runs and drive in 111 runs every single year? I'm not so sure we can. So I think there's a little bit of a reason to be concerned with Riley Green, but maybe you can talk me off the ledge a little bit.
It was a 90 WRC plus in the second half of the season. So 10% below average as a hitter overall. That's not going to cut it for your all-star. I do think, even you touched on it, he is still a remarkable talent. We've seen that since he was drafted. He's got some things that some guys just can't, you can't teach guys. The power, the hitting ability, it's in there.
He's special.
Yeah. And he just turned 25. Now he's got 3-ish full seasons and others, but I guess not 3 full seasons. But typically they say, the baseball players are in their prime in this era, this age range, 24, 27 or so. So I think there's still time for him to kind of combine what he did last year with what he did this year. Just 4% more walks, 4% fewer strikeouts. He's always going to strike out a fair amount because he swings really hard, trying to hit the ball really hard, but just cut it down a little bit, go into the offseason, work on your swing a little bit. I think he uses his dad as a hitting coach or, some people from when he was growing up and just work on it a little bit. I tend to agree with you. I don't think the defense and the speed is going to get any better. He's always had an awkward gait. And he may be a first baseman DH down the road. And I do think that he might not be the sort of player that you want to extend or re-sign after his rookie contract expires, if you will. But you still got him for 3 more seasons, I believe. And I think he can be a very good player and continue to be an all-star level player during that time because he has these natural abilities that a lot of people don't. But he's going to have to work on it. He's going to have to continue to work on it. And who knows, maybe a good postseason will head him in the right direction.
Question 2 of the big 2. Did the Tigers make a mistake by not trying to win the AL Central on the final day of the regular season? The Tigers entered Sunday's series finale and season finale against the Red Sox, needing a Tigers win and a Guardians loss to win the American League Central. In the 9th inning, the Tigers had runners on first and second base with 1 out, trailing 4-3 to the Red Sox. The Tigers could have pinch hit Riley Green, Spencer Torkelson, or Dylan Dingler. All 3 of those players given off days after the big champagne and beer celebration after clinching a spot in the postseason. But instead, manager AJ Hinch let Jake Rogers and Parker Meadows hit. Jake Rogers struck out, Parker Meadows flew out, and the Tigers lost 4-3. At the exact same time, the Guardians were losing 5-4 through 7 innings. And the Tigers could see that on the out-of-town scoreboard on the Green Monster at Fenway Park. But instead of getting aggressive in that moment to try to win the AL Central, AJ Hinch chose to rest his players for the wild card series. And it didn't end up mattering anyway because the Guardians rallied twice and ended up winning 9-8 over the Texas Rangers in extra innings, which won them the AL Central. Remember, the Tigers had to win and the Guardians had to lose, and the Guardians won Sunday's game, so the Guardians won the AL Central. But at the decision point in the 9th inning, with 2 on and 1 out for the Tigers, the Guardians were losing and the Tigers had a chance to win. I mean, that would have been not only winning Sunday's game, but also winning the AL Central. And instead, the Tigers chose to rest their players. The Tigers make a mistake by doing that. Does that upset you as a baseball observer that the Tigers didn't go out there and give it their best chance to not only just win a baseball game, but to win the AL Central, to win the division crown?
I don't know if it's a mistake, but it did feel a little disheartening, if that makes any sense. Like, I understood you want to give these guys a day off, and they were probably not feeling like playing baseball much anyway. I saw how they played last year after they clinched the division. Or clinch the playoff spot. But yeah, like to just see a team that's clearly not doing everything they can to win. And to be clear, I'm not saying they should have started Skubal or something like that, right?
And me either. They made the right decision there, right? I mean, that was the right decision of saving him for game 1. But like again, and I totally understand sitting Spencer Torkelson, Riley Green, Dylan Dingler. But when you get to the 9th inning with 2 on and 1 out, and you look at that out-of-town scoreboard and you say, Cleveland's losing, we have a chance to win right now and win the AL Central, that's what's bothersome. I'm not saying they needed to start Riley Green and start Spencer Torkelson and start Dylan Dingler and pitch Tarik Skubal. I'm just saying when the opportunity was there, when there was a chance to seize the moment, they just sat back and let it play out.
Yeah, and we've gotten used to AJ Hinch basically pushing every button he can in every game. When there's an advantage to be had, he'll go for it. You pinch hits guys all the time. And so it was like, oh, here's a spot where they bring somebody in. They had a couple opportunities to do that, and he just didn't. And maybe part of that was because it did seem to be Rogers a few times. And if there's somebody you definitely want to give the rest to, it's Dingler, right? Like, cause he may catch every single game in the playoffs if it, goes to that. But yeah, it feels weird. And maybe you don't want the team or the players thinking about any of this stuff either. But like, there's more to playing at home than just playing at home. There's that's 2-3 more games for fans. It's 2-3 more gates for your owner who pays your paychecks. It's 2-3 more gates for all the community and the restaurants, and the bars and things like that. It affects more things than just what's happening on the field. And again, I don't know if you want them to think about that at all. You probably just want them to focus on baseball, but it feels a little, I don't know. It's not gross. It just was disheartening. Like, you don't like to see a team go out there and not try their best to win. I know the guys who were playing were trying their best, but the team itself didn't put out their, the best lineup or the best effort.
I think when you talk about the Tigers having just clinched a spot in the postseason, obviously it was the hangover game for them. At the same time, the Guardians had already clinched their spot in the postseason, just like the Tigers, but the Guardians started Steven Kwan and Jose Ramirez, and the Guardians used Kyle Manzardo as a pinch hitter, and the Guardians started Logan Allen. Like, the Tigers had Andy Ibanez playing first base, Javier Baez playing second base, and Chris Paddock starting, with Paul Sewald and Tanner Rainey coming out of the bullpen. And I get it. When the game began, the Tigers did not control their own destiny. So I understand why the Tigers went with the lineup they went with, the starting pitcher they went with. But in the ninth inning, in that moment, the Tigers had a chance to control their own destiny because Cleveland was losing at the time. So, and again, like we had mentioned, nobody is saying Tarik Skubal should have started. The Tigers obviously made the right decision to save him for game one of the wild card series. But with a chance to win the game in the ninth inning, why not pinch hit Riley Green or Spencer Torkelson or Dylan Dingler? And the reason the Tigers didn't do that is because taking the lead would have meant using Rafael Montero in the bottom of the ninth inning. Or it could have meant extra innings, which would have meant more relievers would have been used. But I don't know. I take a look at how things unfolded on Sunday, and you start going on social media and you see videos of the Cleveland Guardians having another celebration in their clubhouse, and you're like, let's just take a peek at the vibe check here. Like, the Guardians' vibes are high, the Tigers' vibes are low, and I think the Tigers had a chance to go out of the regular season on a really high note and bring postseason baseball back to Comerica Park in Detroit, but it didn't happen. And then I go all the way back to December of 2024, MLB winter meetings. AJ Hinch said the goal for the Tigers in 2025 is to win the AL Central. First thing, the Tigers failed to accomplish their goal. Second thing, the Tigers had a chance to accomplish their goal and decided not to try. And I think that's probably what bothers me the most. Like, if you say you're going to do something, then do it. Or at least go down trying. And in the ninth inning of Sunday's game, the Tigers were not trying to win. And I'm not saying they had to start Tarik Skubal in game 162, but when you had a chance to win in the ninth inning, why didn't you try to win? Especially considering your goal for 2025, as stated by manager AJ Hinch at the winter meetings in December of 2024, was to win the AL Central. And it could have led to postseason baseball at Comerica Park. But anyway, like, it doesn't really matter because the Guardians came back twice and they won in extra innings. So I guess it doesn't really matter. But I don't know. I think the way that it went down, it just feels weird. It just feels weird. It feels weird, especially going into the postseason, where maybe they could have picked up a little bit extra momentum had Riley Green or Spencer Torkelson delivered a big swing off the Green Monster, or maybe even over the Green Monster. And then the vibes are immaculate heading into game one of the wild card series. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we are joined by Bobby Scales, the radio analyst for the Detroit Tigers. Everyone, I'd like to welcome Bobby Scales, radio analyst for the Detroit Tigers, to the Days of Roar podcast. He will be on the air with Dan Dickerson for the wild card series between the Tigers and Guardians at Progressive Field in Cleveland. Bobby, thank you for joining me to preview a very, very important playoff series.
No, this is going to be interesting. First of all, always a pleasure to be on with you guys. You guys do a great job in depth here and there every day. So I appreciate the job that you guys do. I'm just glad to get on.
So 9 games in 17 days between the Tigers and Guardians. With these next 3 games in the AL wildcard series, these teams are very familiar with each other. What are your expectations for this AL Central showdown here in the postseason?
I think you're going to see everything you've seen in all the games prior to this, if you think about it. So 13 times in each of the last 2 regular seasons, that's 26, 5 in the playoffs last year. It's over 30 times you've seen each other in a 2-year period. That's a lot of baseball against the same team. If you look at how these games are won, that's the interesting part about this whole thing, right? You have 2 teams that are very similar. I think the only thing is the Tigers have a little bit more power in their game, but they got to pitch. They're going to play good defense. That's staples of both these teams. The Guardians are more apt to do things small ball wise to win games than the Tigers are, but the Tigers are more apt to hit homers to win ball games, driving the majority of their runs than the Guardians are. So I don't see any revelations happen. I don't see any things that either side either didn't expect or wasn't ready for. This is going to be an exercise in execution. And I think for me, for my money, the team whose starters do the best job going deeper into games is the team that's going to win the series.
We'll get into more of the playoff series, but I do want to go back because everybody starts with a 0-0 record when the postseason begins, right? But the Tigers just finished the regular season with 9 wins in their final 31 games. Can you help everyone understand what went wrong for the Tigers and how maybe can they turn things around now that we're getting into October baseball?
What went wrong? I don't know that things went wrong. I think you ran into just some bad baseball at the worst possible time. If you think about the bad stretches, you had the 12 out of 13 losses coming out the All-Star break, and then you had a 9-21 stretch, right? So that's just under a quarter of the schedule, of the full schedule. I think when you're talking about regular season baseball, you have to look at the things in the aggregate and not drill down so hard. The periods where they weren't playing well. But what's obvious? The offense had a tough time. It seemed like every time they did square up a ball, they got caught, especially the run spawn position. I will say, a few more punch outs than we saw in other stretches of offensive baseball for this team. So that at times could be concerning. And then, there was a stretch there where the pitchers, they didn't pitch well either. So when you have those things happen, you're struggling to score runs. And then you have part of that stretch where the pitchers aren't really doing a great job either, attaining the upside. It just makes for a tough time.
To be fair, the Tigers, before that rough stretch to finish the regular season, they were one of the best teams in all of baseball, one of the best teams in the American League. What do you want to see out of them in this best of 3 wild card series? What do you want to see them do that they were able to do earlier in the season just to make sure that they don't carry those late season struggles over into the postseason? What do you need to see?
It's 0-0. Nobody has a record. It's like day one of the season, but this is the most important season, and 18 teams in the industry are watching you guys play. So I think wash away how you get there. Whether you won the division by 15 games or whether you lost the division and ended up in a wild card, doesn't matter at this point. And I think the things that this team does well, they pitch when they get people on base. They can get volumes of runners on base, the 2 base advances, the aggressive base running. They put pressure on your defense to make plays and make accurate throws because they're going to dash and then catching a baseball and then finding a way to get a big hit. This is not earth-shattering stuff. And that's what they did all year to get in the situation they were in as being one of the best teams, if not the best team in the game for a large majority of the year.
The 162 game schedule is over. Getting back into this wild card series, facing the Guardians for what could be 9 games in 17 days. It is going to be 8 games in 16 days for sure. But if game 3 is needed in this wild card series, then it's going to be 9 games in 17 days. Pitchers, hitters, who has the advantage? When 2 teams are going back and forth so many times, is it advantage pitcher? Is it advantage hitter? Or is it a little bit of both?
Well, I think it's a situation where if you're a hitter and you see a pitcher well, if you don't necessarily have number, but you see a pitcher well, I think it's advantage hitter. If you're a hitter and this guy's good, you don't see him well or the number is stacked up against you, then it's obviously advantage pitcher. So, we're us baseball players, funny creatures. We can make ourselves believe anything. And if you feel like you see this guy well, that I'm using this example off the top of my head. If Kerry Cargo feels like he sees Gavin Williams well, then he sees Gavin. That's what that is, So I don't necessarily think there's an advantage or disadvantage. I think it's all how each individual player perceives that pitcher to be, and vice versa too. Vice versa, it works for pitchers too. Like I dominate this guy, so or whatever. Whether it's Skubal against
Jose Ramirez. Right.
Yeah, whoever it is.
Speaking of Tarik Skubal, what are you looking to see out of him in game 1 of this wildcard series? What really impresses me is that time and time again, this guy sets the tone, not only for the pitching staff, but for the team as a whole. When he comes out and he's throwing 100-mile-an-hour bullets in the first inning, that is sending a message. It is go time. Are you expecting more of that from Skubal in game 1? And what do you want to see out of him as he faces the Guardians for the 3rd start in a row?
Well, I think the biggest thing is just something he does very well, which is manage his competitive fire and be able to execute pitches. Because at the top of that lineup, you got Stephen Kwan, who I don't know the number, but he sees him well because the at-bats he puts up against him, even if they're not necessarily hits or whatever, they are long, drawn out at-bats that, to the pitch count. Jose Ramirez, that guy's stuff, right? And so I think what Skubal needs to do, which is something he does all the time, he comes out, he dictates the turns. He doesn't react. You react to him. He dictates, I've got the ball. You're going to do what I tell you. And that's how he goes about it. And just making sure he continues to do that and get ahead of these guys. Because once he gets ahead of people, it's, if they make contact, it's going to be weak contact. And he's really good at doing it. So I look forward to him. just doing the same thing he's done all year. Bully fastballs, executing that changeup down below the zone, getting swing and miss in the zone with it as well. And then throwing that slider and the occasional curveball when he needs to. The formula doesn't change.
You mentioned Tarik Skubal and that competitive fire. How hard is it for players to manage their competitive fire? Because I remember Tarik Skubal, when he was a younger pitcher, he used to throw his glove in the dugout after bad innings and bad outings, and he would really let things get to him. He doesn't seem to do it anymore. And yes, I understand that there is like a level of greatness that he possesses, but at the same time, he's had to learn to manage that over time. How hard is that for a player to really grasp? And I guess, what does it say about Tarik Skubal that he is able to do that?
You have to be who you are. Jack Flaherty is a stoic figure. That's who he is. Asking Jack to be fired up, fist pump in the pitch is not who Jack Flaherty is. Tarik Skubal is a fiery competitor that you know where he's at. He doesn't have a poker face. There's no confusing what's going on with him. When you ask players to limit that, run the risk of losing what makes that player great. So you learn how to manage that. Try error, experience, on-field maturity, through off-field maturity. He's certainly not the same guy that he was a few years ago before he had a kid. I remember my son was not born. I was playing. But after my playing career, he came on, but I am definitely not as excitable as I once was 12 years after, my son was. I'm a different human. So you grow and you change, you evolve on the field, but more important, evolve off the field. And I think that I'm a big believer. I've said this once a lot before. The player resides within the man. If the man matures, players can mature as well, right? So understanding how we mature, how we grow as humans.
You mentioned Jack Flaherty. Who do you think should start for the Tigers in Game 2 of this wildcard series? Casey Mize, Jack Flaherty. Obviously, those are the two guys who are being considered. And Jack Flaherty, he can get the strikeouts. Casey Mize, we just saw him come off of a great start against the Boston Red Sox, even though the Tigers lost. And, Casey, just like Jack, very stoic on the mound, but we did see Casey bounce off the mound a little bit, shout in celebration, pump his fist a couple of times. And that was a very impressive start against the Red Sox. And then obviously you look to Jack and you say, yeah, that guy won the World Series with the Los Angeles Dodgers in 2024. He can miss a bat when he needs to. There are a lot of pros for both of these starters. Who do you think should start in Game 2? Not taking anything away from either guy, but the Tigers are going to have to pick someone.
Well, they are. And I think that neither one is a bad option. That's clearly not my decision to make. And, AJ and the Brain Trust, they'll sit down and they'll figure that out. But I think the way that Jack has come on of late is important. And the fact that he pitched, he's got a World Series. Can't deny that. He's pitched in the biggest games that baseball players are going to play. Casey's put together a really good start to that last start against Boston and Fenway. When, he did not get the win, the Tigers did win that night. Man, he was fantastic. I don't know if it's the best start of his career. It's the best start I've ever seen in the 3 years I've been on the broadcast team. And that's coming off two pretty good ones before that too. So, I think the Tigers will be fine either way. But yeah, I don't know if there's a bad choice for Game 2.
A lot of history between these two teams. What do you think is going to be the X factor in this wildcard series between the Tigers and Guardians? If you could put your finger on one thing that's ultimately going to make the difference, one way or the other, what is that X factor? I'm
going to give you one boring answer and then I'll give you an answer that I'm a big believer. Number one, the boring answer is this. It's literally execution. Like, who's going to make plays? There could be a cutoff relay that either gets botched or gets executed perfectly. It's going to be a difference. It's going to be a pickoff play somewhere. Someone dekes somebody at the wall and through, not advancing on a ball and they probably should. But those are the kinds of things that in each series where the teams are so evenly matched those are the margins, right? I think you're going to see an extraordinary, history tells playoffs, you get an extraordinary performance from somebody you never thought you would, right? And who is that person going to be? Whether it's a pitching performance, whether, one of the pitchers exits early, Cato Montero comes in and saves the day and throws 4 strokes, something like that. Whether, I don't know, but insert name of player here, Daniel Schmiedman does something extraordinary that we're not expecting him to do and has a great game. So I think it's going to be something like that is the difference in this series.
All right, Bobby, thank you for chopping it up about the Tigers as we get ready for the best of 3 wildcard series against the Guardians, which begins Tuesday. Once again, thank you very much for joining the Days of Roar podcast.
You got it. Always a pleasure.
Everyone, that was Bobby Scales, the Detroit Tigers radio analyst. You can hear him on the radio with Dan Dickerson for games 1 and 2, and if necessary, game 3 of the wildcard series between the Tigers and the Guardians. We have more to discuss this week about the Tigers with co-host Chris Brown, but first, let's take a break. All right, we're back. Thanks again to Bobby Scales for joining us. Chris Brown, let's dig into the big question that everyone wants to know, because we all know Tarik Skubal is starting game 1 of his wildcard series, but who should be the game 2 starter for the Tigers against the Guardians? Casey Mize, Jack Flaherty?
Yeah, so all this time I was just kind of in my head assuming that it's going to be Jack Flaherty because he's got, the superior stuff, and he seems like the guy who give you a long outing and shut it out, down another team. But I dug into it a little bit, and to be honest, I think I would go with Casey Mize at this point. It's pretty close, but Mize had 3 solid starts against Cleveland this year, and 2 of them were early in the season, so maybe they don't count. But he ended up giving 4 earned runs in 17 and 1/3 innings with 18 strikeouts and 4 walks. And the 4 walks is the key. Now Jose Ramirez owns him, but again, he owns everybody. But Manzardo and Kwan haven't done anything against Mize. And what concerns me a little bit about Flaherty is he had a solid 3.94 ERA in 16 innings against Cleveland this year. Also 3 starts, only 11 hits. So fewer hits than Mize gave up, but 7 walks and 2 homers. And they really made him work. He's seen them twice, or they have seen him twice in the last couple of weeks. And they made him work a ton in both of those outings. 95 pitches just to get through 5, 2 starts ago. And then his most recent start, 4 1/3 innings and 83 pitches. So it just feels to me like they're starting to hone in on Flaherty a little bit. And, I guess I just feel like Mize gives him a better chance to go a little deeper into a game. Now, I think everybody's going to be a short leash no matter what. So if Flaherty goes out and gives you 3 scoreless innings, but starting to look iffy, they might replace him anyway. So I don't know, but I think I'm going with Mize here.
Yeah, that's where I'm at as well. And I feel bad because I feel like I disrespected Casey Mize a few weeks ago when I ranked my game 2 starters. And I said, okay, I'd go, I can't believe I'm saying this now, but I went Charlie Morton 1, Jack Flaherty 2, and Casey Mize 3. And then I did, I gave the disclaimer of like, I love everything that Casey Mize does. He's a bulldog on the mound. He's going to go to war for you. Like Casey Mize is just a different kind of cat when it comes to his presence on the mound. I think Casey Mize's presence on the mound is so much different than Jack Flaherty's and Charlie Morton's. Casey Mize, he's fearless out there. There are runners on base. He is not afraid, and he will find a way to get out of it. And that's something that I've always respected about Casey Mize. That's why I thought it was important to bring that up. But my point was, we know Charlie Morton with the curveball can miss some bats. We know Jack Flaherty can get the strikeouts. Like that was kind of the reason why I leaned more Charlie Morton, Jack Flaherty when it came to a game 2 starter. But watching Casey Mize and what he's done, 8 strikeouts in 3 of his last 4 starts, and go specifically to that start against the Boston Red Sox. I know the Tigers lost 4-3. They lost in walk-off fashion. It was not Casey Mize's fault. Casey Mize was outstanding. 6 1/3 innings, gave up 2 runs, 6 hits, 0 walks, 8 strikeouts, and he did it on 80 pitches. And you saw the way that his stuff was working. Up in the zone, down in the zone. The fastball was lively. The splitter was good. He was able to throw all the variations that he has of his slider. Like it just seemed like everything has started to click for him recently. He's been very efficient, and he was especially efficient against the Red Sox. And then it was the demeanor that really stood out to me. Gets a big strikeout and you hear him kind of scream in excitement, right? And you see him bounce off the mound, not like Tarik Skubal. Tarik Skubal roars, and Tarik Skubal spins and backpedals and does all that pageantry. Casey Mize, though, like he was pumping his fist a little bit. He was bouncing off that mound with some energy after some big moments that he was able to get out of and some big strikeouts that he had. And I said, man, like Casey Mize is showing up with some swag right now. This guy is pitching. He's on one. He's on one. And that's how he looked against the Red Sox in Fenway Park in the biggest start of his career. I talked to Tarik Skubal after, and Tarik Skubal said that was the best that he's ever seen Casey Mize. Minor leagues, big leagues, you name it. That was the best that he has seen Casey Mize. And it just happened to be in the biggest moment, in the biggest game when the Tigers needed a really good start from Casey Mize. He stepped up and delivered. That's why I lean Casey Mize, because he has just proven to us that he can rise to the occasion. And you know what? Maybe it doesn't work out. Maybe Casey Mize gets shelled by the Guardians, right? Maybe Jack Flaherty gets shelled by the Guardians. Who knows? But I think going into it, I trust Casey Mize. I trust what he's shown, not only just in his last start against the Red Sox, but what he showed us against the Braves, what he showed us against the Guardians, what he showed us against the Yankees in New York. I know he gave up 2 home runs, but those are the only runs that he gave up across 6 innings, and he struck out 8 with no walks. Like, he's in the zone, he's commanding his pitches, he's getting strikeouts, and that presence on the mound right now, it just feels different. And for a team that is struggling to find ways to win, I think you have to ride momentum like this from an individual player. If Casey Mize has momentum, like ride it till it dies out, baby, because this may last for a little bit if he's found something here.
Yeah, I mean, you can make an argument that over the last month, he's been every bit as good as Skubal. I mean, he's more hits than Skubal has given up because nobody really hits Skubal, but he's not walking people like you said. And that's where I think he has the advantage over Flaherty, because Flaherty will kind of pick at you and pick at the batter, and then the high pitch count goes up, and Casey Mize is coming at you. And, if he hangs a splitter, that might go over the fence, but otherwise you're going to have to put together 2-3 hits in a row against him. And he's done a pretty good job of limiting that so far. So yeah, I really do. I agree with you. He's always had that really good demeanor on the mound. It's just now the stuff and the demeanor are kind of melding at the perfect time. So yeah, he'd be my number 2 starter.
All right, let's get into Colt Keith, the latest on his injury. As a reminder, he has right rib cage inflammation. He called it an intercostal strain. So that's what we're going to go with, an intercostal strain that is described on MLB.com as right rib cage inflammation, but we're going with intercostal strain because that is what Colt Keith said. He joined the Tigers in Cleveland for the wild card series, but he will not be active for the best of 3 series against the Guardians. He will continue his rehab in Cleveland. That means the Tigers are ramping up the volume and the intensity of his rehab work, but he will not play in the wild card series. However, the Tigers are hopeful that Colt Keith will be able to play in the ALDS if they advance. I wonder how much of a difference this makes here, not having Colt Keith in this wild card series. You're looking at Zach McKinstry as your primary third baseman against right-handed pitchers. The Tigers are going to face Gavin Williams, Tanner Bybee in games 1 and 2. You have to think Zach McKinstry is your starter there at third base. How much different do you feel about the Tigers lineup with Colt Keith as opposed to Zach McKinstry at this point in the season? I know Z-Mac was an all-star and he deserves credit for what he did in the first half, but it has been all downhill since then. I just think this lineup is so much deeper with Colt Keith in it, and maybe not so much for Zach McKinstry, but there is the defensive upside of Zach McKinstry, who I think maybe is a little bit better at third base than Colt Keith. I think I feel more confident in Z-Mac at third base than Colt at third base. So maybe a little bit of give and take with the offense and the defense. But for a team that needs to score runs, you would think Colt Keith is a significant boost over Zach McKinstry. Do you feel the same way? And do you think that this is one of those losses that we ultimately look back on and say, man, what if the Tigers had Colt Keith in the wild card series? Or do you not think it's that significant?
No, I think it is pretty significant because you touched on it. They're going to face a couple right-handed starters, and I think Slade Ciccone is their third starter, another right-handed pitcher. But Cleveland has a bunch of lefties in the bullpen, including a couple of guys who were starters this year they could throw into the bullpen in the playoffs. And so we're going to see some mixing and matching. And I think you're going to get left-handers starting the games, but at key moments in the game, they may, Hinch may go to a right-handed hitter, may go to Ibanez, may go to Jahmai Jones or whatever. And then later in the game, he may want another lefty, and the options then just become one batter less. You're looking at, if you start with McKinstry, you're looking at maybe bringing Trey Sweeney off the bench, or Jace Young if he makes the roster. It just doesn't feel quite the same. And Colt Keith has been one of their better hitters with men on base this year. He is one of the few guys who doesn't necessarily he's going to put the ball in play for the most part. He still has some strikeouts, but he's a guy that usually figures out a way to put the bat on the ball. So yeah, you're going to miss him. You hope. There's a lot of hope here, right? You hope that the Tigers advance through this round, and then Colt Keith has enough of a recovery that he can come out and help them in the next round. But yeah, it's one of their key bats, and he's gone, and that's going to hurt them. As
we look ahead to this Tigers Guardians series, who or what is the X factor for the Tigers or even for the Guardians in the wild card series? For me, I always fall back on the bullpen. I think it's going to be the biggest X factor because this game has shown us time and time again that bullpens matter, especially in October. Always has been. Always will be in the postseason. Unfortunately for the Tigers, the Guardians have a significantly better bullpen than the Tigers. But if the Tigers relievers can rise to the occasion and unleash some of that 2024-like success in 2025, then that puts them in an outstanding position to win this series, especially with Tarik Skubal, best pitcher in the world, starting in game 1, and the fact that the Tigers, across the board, they just have a better offense than the Guardians. So it seems like the Tigers, if they can get the bullpen right, and if they can get the matchups they want, and if those guys can execute, I think the Tigers will have a chance. But when you compare the two bullpens, it's pretty significant. That's kind of my X factor, is this Tigers bullpen and this Guardians bullpen. It clearly favors one side.
Yeah. And when you're talking bullpens, you're usually talking kind of small sample sizes, but Tyler Holton and Brant Herter, who I think are going to be really important, the two lefties there, they may add another one. I don't know.
No, they're not. And that's my problem too, is like the Tigers are going to go into this series with only 2 left-handed relievers once again, Tyler Holton, Brant Herter. The Guardians have 7 left-handed hitters, 8 lefty hitters if you count Chase DeLauter, a former first-round pick who joined the Guardians at Progressive Field for Monday's workout day, and he could be activated. There's a chance Chase DeLauter plays in this series, which is just incredible because he hasn't played in the big leagues yet, but he very well could now play in the postseason. I am so surprised that the Tigers don't have lefty reliever Bailey Horn here. I think not having a third lefty reliever, even if it's just the threat of being able to go to another lefty reliever, could really come back to haunt the Tigers, especially if this wild card series goes to game 3. Because if you have to use Tyler Holton and Brant Herter in games 1 and 2, and it goes to a game 3, you're going to give some of those same hitters another look at Tyler Holton, at Brant Herter, after they've already seen him how many times in the past 2 weeks? Like, I think that could be a huge mistake on the Tigers' end, not carrying 3 left-handed relievers, especially if the Guardians are going to call up Chase DeLauter and make it 8 left-handed hitters as opposed to just 7. So, I mean, that's another area where you look at these 2 bullpens and you're like, the Tigers just don't have what the Guardians have.
Yeah. And I was just say those guys have been pretty good lately, but yeah, they're 2 against Cleveland might have 4 or 5 different lefties they could throw out there. So that's kind of, I'm going to go to the other side of the ball. And to me, the X factor is kind of Kerry Carpenter and Jahmai Jones. Those are, you got Riley Green, you got Torkelson. Those are your big bats, right? But Carpenter's the guy that it feels like he's the guy who could bust the game open early. If, it's the 2nd or 3rd inning and they have multiple guys on base, then they're not going to bring in a lefty just to face him that early. Maybe they would. I don't think they would do that to themselves, but he's the guy who could give you that big hit. He's capable of it. And then beyond that, he's the guy that they're going to target with lefty relievers down later in the game with men on base. And that's where Jahmai Jones comes in. And he's huge. He's been great this year in his role as a lefty masher. So he's another guy who's going to have to come through in those situations. He's been doing it a lot lately. And so I think those are big, but this is again where the problem is so, theoretically, the Carpenter, they pinch hit Jones for him in, I don't know, the 5th inning. And then he comes up again later in the game with men on. That would be where you would want to use Colt Keith maybe if you had him, and they just don't have that option anymore. So Carpenter or Jones are going to have to make the most out of their opportunities early in games, I think.
I'll be very fascinated to see what happens. And you brought up the chance of it happening is like, what if the Tigers have 2 runners on with 1 or 2 outs in the 4th inning, let's just say? I mean, do the Guardians dare go to Tarik Skubal for a matchup against Kerry Carpenter, which would give the Guardians the matchup advantage there? And if the Guardians were to go to somebody like Tarik Skubal or Tim Herrin, what do the Tigers do there? Would the Tigers then pivot off of Kerry Carpenter, lose him for the rest of the game to go to Jahmai Jones and try to get the big swing with 2 on and 1 or 2 outs in the 4th inning? Like, that's a real dilemma that the Tigers are going to have to figure out. When do we want to deploy our bench bats? How early do we want to bring Kerry Carpenter out of the game to get the matchup advantage if the Guardians do go to a left-handed reliever in a big situation like that? Like, that is going to be very fascinating to watch as this series goes along. And I know it's only a best of 3 series, but with the righties that Cleveland is going to be starting, this could be a multi-game dilemma that the Tigers have to deal with. I guess to put you on the spot, right? Like, if you were in the manager's chair, like, I don't know, like, what would you do? Like, if you're Stephen Vogt and let's say it is 2 on, 1 or 2 outs in the 4th inning, are you going to one of your lefties for Kerry Carpenter? And then if you're AJ Hinch, are you willing to really lose Kerry Carpenter for the rest of the game to go to Jahmai Jones, knowing how good Jahmai Jones has been against lefties and knowing how important every run is, especially in the postseason? How would you handle that on either side? Because I'm pretty torn.
Yeah, I think if I'm Vogt, it's going to depend on how those other runners got on base a little bit. Like if it's Gavin Williams and he's walked 3 guys and Carpenter's up, I don't know. If it's a couple, Cleveland hits, 60 mile an hour exit velocity hits, then I might keep him in there. But
a little bit of guards ball. Yeah.
And if I'm Hinch, I'm sure it'll be frustrating to fans, but if there's 3 on and 1 out and they bring in a lefty to face Kerry Carpenter, I'm bringing in Jones. I think you have to. He's done so well in that role. He's done it all year. Why change now? It's unfortunate because you want Carpenter in there later in games against the tough righty. We saw him. He was a weapon off the bench against Cade Smith a couple of weeks ago, but just the way this is going to work out, I think he's going to start every game. You don't want to leave him on the bench just to use him as a weapon later. So it's tough, but I think If I'm Vogt, it depends on how those runners got on. And if I'm Hinch, I'm doing it if this is, could be our only chance to score.
Yeah, you have to take your scoring opportunities. And the way that Tigers fans will pull their hair out is if there is a situation like that, AJ Hinch goes to Jahmai Jones. Jahmai Jones doesn't get it done in the big spot. And then later on in the game, it's like Cade Smith against Jahmai Jones or something like that in the ninth inning in a big spot. And then you're like, oh man, that was supposed to be Kerry Carpenter's spot. I guess that's the life of a manager in 2025. But those are the decisions that you have to make. All right, let's look at the postseason picture as a whole. Do you think this is the best path for the Tigers to win the World Series? Cleveland Guardians in the Wild Card Series, Seattle Mariners in the ALDS. Don't have to face the Toronto Blue Jays, New York Yankees, Boston Red Sox until the ALCS. Do you like this path to a championship for the Tigers?
Cleveland's haunting effect over the Tigers notwithstanding, that's the team you want to play in the first round if you have to. They have, on the season, it's a bottom 5 offense. They have good pitching, but this is a pitchable lineup if you execute. And meanwhile, the Yankees have, I think, the top offense in baseball. The Mariners are like top 5. So that next round, you're kind of picking your poison there. The Mariners, the Blue Jays, the Yankees, the Red Sox, they're all good teams. You're going to have to beat good teams. But yeah, I mean, this is, if you want to win a short series and you think you can shut down a team, Cleveland's the team you could try to do it to. It's just a matter of kind of overcoming whatever weird spell they have with the Tigers right now.
Yeah, for me, I look ahead a little bit when you take a peek at the Seattle Mariners. Like, that's not the team that I would want to be facing. Obviously, yes, you probably want to face Cleveland. In the wild card series. Maybe. I mean, I don't know. I think maybe the Tigers match up better against the New York Yankees. Maybe they match up better against the Boston. I mean, I don't know. It could go either way, but there is just something about Tigers versus Guardians in Cleveland. I just don't like that. And then Tigers versus Mariners. I don't care if you're in Seattle or Detroit. I don't like that either. That offense, Cal Raleigh, Julio Rodriguez, Randy Arozarena, JP Crawford, Josh Naylor, Eugenio Suarez, the pitching, Brian Wu, Luis Castillo, Logan Gilbert, George Kirby, all starters. And then, oh, by the way, Andres Munoz, who has a 1.73 ERA and 38 saves as the closer in all those big situations. Like, for me, the Mariners are probably the most dangerous team right now in the American League, even though they have the number 2 seed in the American League. I think the Tigers' best path maybe would have been facing the New York Yankees and then the Toronto Blue Jays to get to the ALCS rather than the Cleveland Guardians and then the Seattle Mariners. I don't know. There's just something about Tigers Guardians that I don't like. And the Mariners, man, that pitching staff is just so good. I don't know. I guess it's all kind of a toss-up anyway, right? Like, you got to win the games in front of you and anybody can beat anybody. The records are all 0-0, but man, doesn't something about Tigers Guardians in Cleveland just kind of freak you out a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, they knocked him out of the playoffs last year. It's great for building a rivalry, I'll tell you that. But yeah, on paper, the best matchups would have been like Cleveland and then Boston somehow, right? But I tend to agree with you. The Tigers I think they've never lost a playoff series to the Yankees, but I don't know if the 2025 Tigers has anything to do with the 2006 Tigers or the 2012 Tigers. So it's fun to say that stuff, but I don't know if it matters. Yeah, you got to go out and beat the teams ahead of you. And yes, the Mariners look very dangerous. They played really well down the stretch. The Yankees have won 9 out of 10. They put all the pressure they could on, I think they won 8 in a row down the stretch to take it to the final game of the season. They pushed the Blue Jays and the Blue Jays responded. So, I mean, these are good teams that make the playoffs. Not everybody could go 3-13 in their final 16 games and slide into the playoffs. So I don't know. It's going to be tough, but yeah, we'll see. Maybe in retrospect, we'll be like, oh, that was a great matchup for the Tigers.
Got to win the game in front of you for the Tigers. That is game 1 of the wild card series against the Cleveland Guardians at Progressive Field in Cleveland. That game is on Tuesday, 1:08 p.m. ESPN. All right, let's get out of here. Thanks to Chris Brown from Tigers Minor League Report for co-hosting with me again this week. Thanks to everyone out there for listening to the latest episode of Days of Roar. Please like, rate, share, and subscribe. Drop us a rating. Comment what you think about the show. And please stick with freep.com/sports for the latest Tigers coverage. I would like to thank the editor of the Free Press, Nicole Avery Nichols, sports editor Bill Bradley, and our magical producer, Robin Chan. For the Detroit Free Press, I'm Evan Petzold. We'll catch you next week. Until then, go in peace.